Hi, my name's Reuben. I live in a little village called Bethel. It's about 10 miles north of Jerusalem. I'm on my way to Jerusalem now. My uncle wants me to go and buy something for him from the market. I'm going to be talking to some people on the way and when I get there as well. But can I tell you something? I want to tell you a story just to explain why. I'm very excited. I'm really pleased about any opportunity these days to go walking, to go anywhere. And it's because of someone who came to Bethel. It's quite a few months ago now. There were two of them, two men, Thomas and Levi, came into Bethel one evening. They just hung around in the centre of the town. They seemed to just want to talk, really. They were very open, very sort of generous. They didn't have an agenda. You know, normally when someone comes around, they want something, don't they? You can tell they're either selling something, or you know, they look a bit suspicious or whatever it may be. But these guys, they were just sort of happy to hang out, happy to be friendly. I got talking to them, and they wanted to talk to me about God. Not my normal cup of tea, but anyway, they just seemed so disarming. I was happy to listen to them. We got talking so long, in the end we invited them in, and they seemed to wish us well, and so they stayed with us for a while, probably just for about 2 or 3 days, and they talked to us a lot. And they also talked to other people in the town too. They wanted to tell us that God is coming, that God is in control, that God is ruling, and that God will have his way, which is a good way, which is the way that's best for everyone. Well, it's quite a nice message, nothing to object to there. Very happy to hear about that. Of course, not everyone liked it. Some people were really snarky with them. Some people just picked arguments for the sake of it. Some people said that they were just kind of religious nut jobs. But they were very gentle and compassionate. They didn't put anyone down or be dismissive. But here's the really fascinating thing, was that they said God was active. God was making his rule become about now. And they offered to pray for us. They said, we'll show you. We'll pray for you. Is there something that you're bothered about? Is there something that you need God's help with? We'll pray for you. Because God is working through us. Well, of course, there were things that we wanted help with, things we wanted prayer for. There were all sorts of people in the town who were ill. And one by one, people brought their relatives, their friends, to Thomas and Levi, and they were prayed for. and I know this sounds a bit wacky, but they were healed. I mean, I feel like really kind of like a nut job now even saying it, but they were actually healed. I mean, there were people who'd just sort of been ill for a little while, you know, who'd got the fever or something, and the fever left them straight away. You know, and you could just say, oh, maybe they were nearly better anyway, though, and they just felt better because someone looked after them. But then there were other people. There were people who'd been, you know, people who'd been really troubled, really disturbed for years, a long time, and Thomas and Levi prayed for them, and things really happened. I mean, it was a while ago now, and I know it was true. I know it was real, because of the way in which those people have been since. It wasn't just short term. They've been calmer. They've felt more secure. They've been happier. They've been able to work again. I mean, really wonderful things have been happening. And so that was what really made an impact on me. It was the message that God was active and the demonstration that God was doing something there and then through these two guys. And it was extraordinary. And they hadn't brought anything with them. They'd got nothing. And that was quite striking. I think that was what attracted me to them in the first place. It was clear they weren't trying to sell something, or they didn't look suspicious. They didn't have a big bag with them and you were wondering what it was. They were there with their sandals on and their staff in their hand, and that was it. And they just wanted to talk. They were vulnerable. I mean, they could have been taken advantage of, as far as I could tell. They weren't trying to protect themselves. They weren't trying to force themselves on anyone. It seemed like they didn't really have anything to lose. And the fact that they didn't have anything, I twigged it. It took me a couple of days to twig this, but the reason why they didn't have anything is because they didn't need anything. Just themselves, just their willingness, just their own knowledge of God and a readiness to tell it, to talk about it in their own way. I mean, they were interesting. There were two different guys. One of them tended to talk. Tom's talked a lot, actually. He would always start off and he would go blah, 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 blah. He was very sort of outgoing. He was the kind of person who always kind of good with small talk. Strike up a conversation with a stranger, all that sort of thing. Levi was quite different. Levi was generally quite reserved and said much less, but was very thoughtful when he did, really insightful, and quite tentative as well. I mean, you could tell he was always it's as if he was holding back. He had to kind of force himself, if anything, to say the things that he did say, but it always got a very warm reaction when he spoke. So I really admired them. They really struck me as people who knew what they were doing, knew what they wanted, and cared for other people. They were looking outwards, and they were willing to be vulnerable, and just their own heart for God was all that they needed. They didn't need anything else. They didn't need money. They didn't need possessions. They didn't need gimmicks. They didn't need a soapbox, because they knew that they were in God's hands. They clearly experienced so much of God for themselves. They were confident that God was at work and that they could be part of that, and they were held secure in God's hands. So they were not afraid to be vulnerable. Well, they made an impact on me, an astonishing impact. They were the sort of people that, you spend time with them and you just can't help but thinking, I want to be like them. They've got something really wonderful. And it wasn't a personality. Like I say, Thomas was just a talker, Levi was a thinker. I'm not really quite like either of those two. So it wasn't a personality thing. It was something about in their heart. The fact that they were so at peace and confident in God's goodness and sure that God was at work. And they were quite happy to say that and to put it into practice. And it didn't always kind of work, so to speak. You know, I mean, they prayed for some people. They prayed for Daniel's son, and he didn't get better. And Daniel was like so bitter about that, and he really, you know, laid into them, and he mocked them, and you know, and he tried to turn other people against them. I mean, that was really unpleasant. But it was just, I mean, you could see they didn't like it. Obviously, it's not pleasant to have someone be so nasty to you, but they just had this solidity within them, and they really cared for Daniel. Even though he was unkind to them, it was obvious that they cared for him. And they just kept on praying. They kept on trusting in God. So I wanted to be like them, and I said, what is it? What's this all about? You know, what is it that you've got? And they said, very simply, they said, well, we met Jesus from Nazareth. He gave us this message, and he demonstrated it to us. And we were like you. We were like saying, we want this. Jesus, can we join in? And he said, yeah, sure, you can join in. You've got the message. You've experienced God's goodness in me. You've experienced God's power that demonstrates God's purposes. So you just join in wherever you go from now on. Just pass the message on, tell other people. Thomas and Levi said to me, that's what Jesus had said to them, and basically they said the same thing to me. They said, Reuben, if you want to do it, you do it. We'll pray for you, and then you go wherever you go. Doesn't matter where you go. You don't need to do anything clever. You don't need to take anything with you. Just take with you that certainty that God is at work, that God is coming in power. That's what Jesus told us. That's what we believe, and that's what we're passing on to you. So if you've experienced it, if you've had anything, any knowledge of God in your life, no matter how slight it may seem, no matter how silly it may seem to say, then wherever you go, as the opportunities arise, tell someone else. If you want to offer to pray for them, offer to pray for them. Because it's God's work. It's not yours. You're not doing anything clever. It's not about what you can do. It's not about what you've got. It's about what God can do. It's about what God wants to do through you. So you may feel very vulnerable. That's fine. God makes himself vulnerable. You may be painfully aware of the fact that you haven't got anything. You haven't got any clever techniques or any possessions that help you in this. You don't need them. You just go in the confidence that you're part of God's purposes. Rejoice that God has done everything that's necessary to give you life. And whatever you've experienced, just tell other people and offer to pray for them and see what God will do.